Okay, then. So thank you everyone for joining today. So I'll do a little bit of introductions first. So I'm Kia from Plandek's customer success team. I'll be hosting the webinar today, and I'm joined by Dan, who I'll let introduce himself.
Yeah, Dan Smith. I'm Technology Solutions Director for Kia, sorry. I was thinking about the last company. So for Tysers, Tysers is a insurance broker in the London market. Been around for 200 years. I've been at Tysers for 2 years now.
Okay, cheers, Dan. So yeah, today in terms of the agenda for the webinar, we're going to be speaking about how Tysers actually use Plandek to strengthen their relationships with their delivery partners that they work with. And the format of the webinar today is going to be a bit more of a conversational style, and then I believe a bit later on we're going to be sharing actually Tysers Plandek instance, so we'll be able to get an insight into kind of the metrics that they use to actually aid their relationship with the delivery partners. So I suppose to start us off then, Dan, could you let us know kind of the scenario at Tysers in terms of before Plandek? Like what was kind of the use case for you looking in terms of a tool like Plandek and what we kind of hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, so I can give you a bit of background on where we. So when I joined as dev manager nearly 2 years ago, we were running a blended team. So we had some developers in house. We had a team of five developers in house, and then we were using a QA partner and a delivery partner as well with their own dev teams. We use Azure DevOps, and I've always found that the reporting capability within the platform's pretty poor. So Microsoft have retired reporting within the platform. They've said that Power BI is the way forward, but for some reason, the connector between the two platforms has always been in preview. So really, I was looking for a way to really get some strong metrics on my own team to begin with, and we started to look around at what was available as an add-on or potentially any solutions within the Microsoft platform. So we came up with a Power BI dashboard that we built ourselves, but I just found that it just didn't meet our needs. There wasn't enough detail. It was very high level, and it was very maintenance heavy as well to kind of drive it forwards. So that was when we started looking around at value management tools, and we came across Plandek.
Okay. So in terms of when you were looking to bring a tool like Plandek on board, kind of what was the response from the third parties that you work with?
I think they were a little bit nervous. So I think let me change. Let me explain quickly the kind of change in relationship. So last year we were purchased by AUB, a year before that actually, but it's kind of taken time to transition in. We decided that it made sense for us to outsource our development to that development partner. Um, so we wanted a way to be able to measure success with them, really, making sure that the outcomes that they were promising were being delivered, and the quality that we wanted was also being delivered. um, so as part of the contractual negotiations, we decided that there would be a set number of KPIs that would be involved in the contract, and that's how we would kind of rate the relationship and see how we were going. And at that time, we were talking to you guys as well around what we could get out of Azure DevOps. What you could offer us in terms of reporting. So I think there was some nervousness to begin with. Our ADO wasn't in the most perfect state. It'd been around for quite a while. There was lots of kind of customization in it. So we knew as part of the relationship evolving, the process needed to evolve as well. Um, so we kind of went into it with our eyes open, and we said, look, let's do a grace period, kind of 6 months. We can work with yourselves and the third party partner, which I think was great actually. So you guys got involved as well, Kia. So we spent a lot of time with you, didn't we, between us and the partner. We onboarded them as well as if they were going to use, well, they do use the tool directly themselves, but as if they were almost one of your customers as well. So I think, quite a unique way of onboarding them, I think.
Okay, great. So in terms of when you were setting the KPIs with the
Mhm.
third parties, and you mentioned that there was some nervousness, in terms of kind of the pushback, like how did you actually handle that?
So we spent a lot of time defining the process together. So, the KPIs weren't out of the blue. We'd had discussions about them previously. We thought as a customer of theirs, they made sense. And I think they came round to it after discussion. It's not about just, ticking the boxes and ticking their kind of, ticking their work through just a set of KPIs. It was about enhancing quality for them as well. And being able to automate a lot of this through Plandek really helped, because for them, they're able to keep an eye on what their teams are doing too, right? So, we're covering the cost of the licensing. We use the licensing, but actually they get the benefit too, because they can look at the quality they're delivering for themselves, and it's not subjective. It's there in black and white.
Yeah, understood. So I think you kind of touched on the next question there a little bit. But in terms of like lessons learned then, so
Mhm,
looking at the start of the relationship in terms of you working with the third party as well as them plan deck, kind of
mhm.
what did you see over that relationship? Obviously, I know we're still on that journey to becoming data driven, but in terms of kind of what you saw at the start in terms of that pushback to kind of how are the third parties ingesting the product now?
Yeah. So it's actually driven more by them than it is us now. So it's really evolved. It started with me talking to you and us buying the platform and saying to our partner, look, we'd really like you to use this to actually, the thing I'm going to show you afterwards is what they deliver to me at the end of each sprint. It's all driven by them and their scrum masters now. It's not actually driven by Tysers anymore, which is really good. It's a desire from them to get better and be better. And actually, they are a quality partner. They do deliver well.
Okay, that's great. So before we actually do jump into that report and the metrics and dashboards, then kind
Mhm,
of we've just touched on the kind of the current state of play that it's more that the third party are using Plandek and kind of driving their own improvements and kind of monitoring their own performance and then
mhm.
reporting this back to Tysers. So what successes and failures have you seen so far?
So I think we've always, as a dev team, pre kind of that outsource, we always get very distracted. So, I think you remember when we first brought the platform in, like our sprint completion was very, very low. And one of the things your platform identified was the way that ADO actually records carried over tickets. So we'd have this thing where our team would go, oh, we didn't complete that, so we'll just move it into the next sprint. But it's the way that ADO records it that actually it really skews your sprint completion, because you're not, it's unplanned work effectively. So regardless of whether you move it in pre sprint, it's still going down as unplanned. So there was a large amount of unplanned work, which actually we're, via the metrics, we're now actually starting to close a lot of that down. Our sprints are looking healthy. They're looking a lot less volatile than they were previously.
Okay, that's good to know. Were there any unexpected results? I know we've had the conversations offline before the webinar, but around kind of the delivery partners are driving um, they're driving their own performance and like what they're working on.
Mhm.
So basically, like, is there anything that these delivery partners are kind of pushing back to you now? Are they asking to change the metrics at all, or are there any other unexpected results?
So yeah, they're driving a lot actually on both sides of the process, because either side of the process they have, we still have a blended QA team, so external partner and internal QA, and we also have in-house BAs that are writing user stories. So actually they're providing a kind of, the partnership is working well in both ways. So they're saying that we've got tickets that are stuck in QA, and it's highlighting that actually. So when we look at delivery time, for example, we can see that a user story is sitting in a particular place because we've got pressure points on the BAs and kind of a choke point there, and also test as well. So we can see that a lot of tickets are still sitting in ready for test, and that's really clear through the platform.
Okay. So with that in mind, then do you want to share your screen then and take us through kind of
Yeah,
the
I can run you through it very quickly. All right, how about now?
yeah, there we go, that's coming through. Perfect. Yeah, so if you just want to take us kind of through this report.
Yeah. So this is the development report that I receive at the end of every sprint, and the data is driven from ADO, but via Plandek. So it's supplemented with Plandek dashboards. We can see here, I can, very quickly at the end of each sprint, I can see the number of bugs that are raised. I can see that against last 2 sprints, last 5 sprints, and then year to date. This is for the whole of all of our teams, so it's quite a lot. I think we've got 7 or 8 platforms under build at the moment, so there's quite a lot in there. We can also see as well completed work by sprint and type, and I can look back very quickly over the last 2 sprints, last quarter, and year to date. So the KPIs, so delivery time is one of our KPIs. As I've said before, it's not all down to our development partner. We have BAs and QAs either side that don't belong to them. But I think that the insightful thing here is actually we're digging into the reasons why. So we can see here, and we've got actions to address those as well. So it's not just, oh, here's the data and there's no context to it. We have the data, and actually then we start to dig into the why and how we're going to resolve these things. So again, you can see here that it's driven by Plandek. We can see the breakdown of our lead times, where they're sitting. Straight off the bat, we can see that tickets are sitting in new because we have a constraint on our BAs at the moment, and again in test as well.
What's the format for reviewing these? So obviously you mentioned that you received this report, but do you have retrospectives, or do you have these in like daily stand-ups where like these actually become initiatives and that you're looking at on a daily basis?
Yeah, so in stand-ups, the live view is actually used because, as I mentioned earlier, sprint completion was a bit of a problem for us. And live view gives us a really good status update of where we're at within the sprint, and actually gives the scrum masters that ability to visualize for the devs, for the QAs, and for BAs. I love the sprint risk. I think sprint risk works really, really well, and it's a great visual to say, your sprint is potentially at risk. Working on, your distraction. I think for us, distraction is a work in progress because it shows a lot around and sometimes not always relevant, but it's certainly a work in progress. Then sprint velocity. So we have this in here. My views on sprint velocity, but we won't go into that. It could be a whole nother webinar. But as you can see here, we've got fairly low volatility. And this is where we're coming into this, we're learning around our commitment and actually what we're getting completed. And these are becoming more aligned. They were really far apart when we first started. Sprint completion has crept up as well. I think we were in the low 30s when we started this, maybe 5-6 months ago. So it's really started to creep the right way. And again, carried over work was much higher than this. So again, there's lots of context underneath as a quick glance, which is great for me. So being able to dig into further items, number of bugs. So we can see that our bug backlog is consistent, but we're also looking at the reasons why as well. So number of fixed bugs are lower as less development was done. And first time pass rates increasing, so we're starting to get fewer bugs, which is fantastic news. And then pass and return rate. So we wanted a high first time pass rate, and that is something to specifically measure our dev team against. And return rate, we use both on both sides. So we use that to look at what the QAs are returning and why they're returning them. And then we look at the triage as well. So, is there a particular area of the product that's complicated or complex? Are we seeing more bugs in one area than another? And actually that allows us then to have a conversation between the QAs and or even the BAs as well get involved. So yeah, that's the dev report that I get in every sprint.
Okay, so you mentioned at the start that in terms of bringing on a tool like Plandek, there was kind of overall pushback to obviously kind of being data driven and somewhat like monitored and using Plandek to push performance. In terms of individual metrics, if we could go just to the top to the first one, for example. So this one here, bugs raised by sprint and priority and kind of completed work items by sprint and type. Did you see any issues kind of with these specific metrics alone, like in terms of when you come to analyzing these with the delivery partners? Do you see an element of where the delivery partners kind of push back on these metrics and say, "Oh, this isn't the right metric to essentially kind of assess us on or try and push performance on per se"?
Um, yeah, I think the pushback came really from the priority assigned to those tickets. Not so much that there were tickets, but it's more a case of, how many of them were P3 versus how many of them are P1. I think that was the kind of pushback we got because they felt it was subjective. So, a certain QA might raise something as a P1, but actually it's P3. So that drove us to improve our refinement. So we will actually go through and we'll triage the bugs and make sure that we all agree on where they sit in the priority so that it's fair more than anything.
Understood. I think it'd also be useful for myself and obviously the other attendees on the webinar. Kind of, so why was it that you picked these metrics for the report? Like, why is it that you want to assess your delivery partners on these specific metrics?
Um, Mainly, there are a couple of some of the bits that I've hidden just to make sure we don't mention the partner themselves. But I think largely, quality. We want to be driven by quality and also by outcomes. And I'd like to get to the point where we are. We find at the moment that we deliver individual user stories, but I'd like to get to a point where we're delivering features. And I think this will see this is a starting place for us. So, measuring the delivery time, for example, is important to make sure obviously we stay on time and we're delivering time versus cost, um, and also with quality as well. Also, so I think if we scroll down, I can then see from this, as I mentioned before, whether it's stuck with our delivery partner or whether it's stuck with our in-house teams, and it so that allows us. It's almost like a fair, I guess, fair view of what they're delivering. So one of the things that we've said with this is that our BAs create user stories, but our delivery partner, Scrum Master, has control of the sprint. So it's not a case of we're kind of saying, well, you will deliver all of this in this time, and if you don't, then it's going to reflect badly on your kind of KPIs. Actually, we've given them full control of the sprint, so they've got a good chance to deliver what they think, and then they can refine that as well through sprint refinement and proper agile ceremonies, making sure that if we come down and we see we see this, for example, they've got control, so they can actually increase the sprint completion themselves. It's not like we're pushing more and more work in, and they're never going to get the sprint completion any higher because it's within their gift to do that.
Oh, okay, so I understand the kind of format there. So even though you're kind of using Plandek to assess the performance, obviously kind of drive areas for improvement, it's actually still on the delivery partners to kind of set the sprints themselves. Like they still have the autonomy to kind of work how they need to work, and then obviously deliver to Tysers as they need to. But then obviously you can kind of use Plandek just to kind of push things in the right direction, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it would be totally unfair of us to say we're going to measure you on all these KPIs, but actually they're not in your control. So having control of the sprint, being able to see Plandek allows them to adjust course for themselves and not have us kind of micromanaging, saying, "Well, you're not hitting this, you're not doing that." But I can see as part of this that actually, the quality is getting better. They are they are increasing the sprint completion, and carried over work is shrinking. And again, as I say, it's within their control to do that. It's not us forcing.
Yeah, completely understood. So I think that's actually kind of the undertone in terms of like the webinar's key message here, really. And would you agree in saying that that's kind of in terms of lessons learned, obviously, of implementing a tool like Plandek when assessing delivery partners, that's kind of not the right way to go about it, because obviously different people have kind of different use cases, so to speak. But that's definitely something that you've learned over time, that giving obviously the teams that autonomy to work, but then also you're kind of monitoring them from an external perspective rather than trying to kind of give them a limited scope, limited levers to kind of pull to get the work done, and then also kind of restricting them too much in terms of those KPIs.
Yeah, I think there's an element of honesty as well in terms of, if I think about it, I was kind of nervous around gamification, right? Being able to kind of gamify the stats. Well, we're just going to close tickets, or we're just going to. I was quite nervous about that, but I think actually what it's done using this is actually it's strengthened our relationship, because we're actually having honest and open conversations about what we're seeing in Plandek. Um, I meet with their scrum masters. They will bring up any concerns they've got. If there's things that they feel that need to be nudged in the Tysers internal teams, then they're happy to do that too. So I think we're quite lucky that we do work together still as almost a blended team.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely what I was trying to touch upon. Like it's not actually the tool's not pushed you apart, it's actually brought you together and kind of
Yeah,
shown.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, so in terms of these metrics, obviously you mentioned that they've kind of you agreed upon these as and when the relationship was kind of forming and you were moving in this direction for a tool. Do you think these metrics will change over time?
Yeah, I think they will evolve. Like I say, I'd like to move towards feature delivery. It's kind of been a historic way that we've approached. Usually, we do quite small, kind of singular apps. So projects spin up, spin down, and that's been one of our learning curves with Plandek. Actually, is that how do we how do we get the best from Azure DevOps in the way that we set it up to the way that we work, versus the kind of getting the reliable data out of Plandek, or being able to build a picture of what we're delivering based on the way that we work. I think that for us is something that's definitely evolved, because we do so many small applications.
Okay, that's great. So in terms of obviously we spoke about the relationship and kind of the way that it's brought you together, but have you seen any demonstrable impact in terms of actually bringing data on board when working with a delivery partner? Like, have you actually seen that this is kind of making, say, cycle times better, velocity better? I know you have touched on that throughout the webinar.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we so I think you can see from from like this first slide, right, is that the guys, sorry, you want to click, it doesn't work. These guys are looking at building a longer term picture, looking back over a quarter. So we have a quarterly performance review where we sit down, my boss joins, head of QA joins, the guys on their side sit down, and we can talk about the picture and where we're going, and looking at statistics and projects, and this just kind of gives you the full view of what's going on. Whereas I think previous tool as a DevOps, that kind of stuff, actually doing reporting in there doesn't give you that project level reporting that senior leadership would want to see.
Okay, yeah, that's great to see. So in terms of next steps, then, have you got any kind of current plans to be updating any of your dashboards? Are you going to kind of carry this on and having those conversations and kind of let it grow naturally over time?
So I'd really like to I'd really like to work QA more into this. So as I say, we've got a QA partner as well. Um, so I would like to kind of work it more on that angle. I haven't played around with it too much just yet, but I certainly would like to move that way. As a DevOps has got test manager capability as well,
Yeah.
so looking potentially out there. But also, I'd still like to see, sprint completion creep up. I think that's really important in terms of the process, and we're still evolving our process with our partner as well. We're moving more towards looking at the support element, and how do we work that in Plandek. So looking at actual support tickets, your P1s, your P2s, not so much project related work. So how can we build out dashboards that kind of give us what we need there?
Yeah, definitely can see how that would provide a bit more value in the end as
Mm.
well. So I can see obviously we've come to the half past mark and we usually leave kind of 10-15 minutes at the end for any questions if anybody would like to put some into the chat. And then we can just hang fire to answer those. But yeah, really appreciate that, Dan. But just in kind of summary of the webinar then, so you'd agree that obviously to start with, you look to a products like Plandek to obviously help you with strengthening the relationship with a key delivery partner. And obviously over time, there's been some pushback and nervousness, as you mentioned at the start, but obviously with working closely with them and then obviously allowing your delivery partners to kind of take Plandek in their own stride and work as they still see fit. But obviously, you've still kind of got that ability to kind of oversee the whole operation and how they perform. You can see a demonstrable impact over that relationship.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely.
I suppose it's just kind of a final word from yourself then. If anybody else out there was kind of looking to do this, would you have any kind of piece of advice or anything that you could kind of speed up the implementation, if you will, to start adding value a bit quicker?
I think, the way that you guys onboard people, I think it's really beneficial actually, both partner and customer being in the room. As I say, when we onboarded with you guys, we all sat in a room together and kind of went through it, and any fears that the supplier had, when they discussed openly with you as well. I think that would probably be the best bit, is make sure that you on board together. It's
Yeah.
not a stick. It's not a stick to be your partner with.
Yeah, so kind of having that open conversation about actually kind of like what metrics are agnostic to how do you work and kind of what is a fair way for you to be assessed. Like what can
Yeah.
you actually agree is something that we should push ourselves on.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with that. Okay, so if there's no questions coming in at the minute, I probably should have mentioned at the start if anybody has any questions to put them into the chat box. But what we can do, we can pick those up after the fact, and then obviously we can send this out with the webinar recording to all of the attendees, so everybody can watch this after the fact. But yeah, if there's no further questions, then really appreciate your time today, Dan.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Okay. I'm going to end the recording there then. Okay, so thank you everyone today for joining.